The story begins on March 10th on Locheng's pedestrian street. The streets were dazzling and full of life. Neon signs of every color glowed on towering buildings, and the city buzzed with endless movement. Inside a dimly lit office, silence was suddenly shattered by a sharp, cold voice. "Kid, do you even know what it means to borrow 5 million won from me?" Under the hanging light, a potted plant reflected a faint gleam. In the background, several men sat around a table. Among them was Xing Yang, the boss of the Young Dahai gang, and one of Lo Cheng's most notorious underground loan sharks. Leaning back lazily in his chair, Xing Yang smiled faintly as he explained, almost proudly, that his interest rates were extremely high. He lit a cigarette and took a slow drag. Smoke curled upward, and a playful yet dangerous glint flashed in his eyes. Across from him sat a young man, trembling with fear. Sweat dripped down his face. Behind him stood two burly bodyguards with shaved heads, their shadows looming over his chair. Despite the fear gripping him, the young man forced himself to appear confident. "Brother Xing, as long as you're willing to lend the money, I don't care how high the interest is. I'll accept it." Xing Yang leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. His voice grew calm, but carried a lethal edge. "Fine. 4% daily interest," he continued casually. "I'll lend you 5 million, and in half a year you'll pay back 7 million. Then Xing Yang's eyes narrowed with icy light. "Of course, you'll also need collateral of equal value?" Trembling, the young man pushed a document forward. "This is the property deed to my house. Please take a look." Xing Yang glanced at it and smiled faintly. "This house is pretty old. At best, it's worth 3 to 4 million yuan. Inside, he laughed mockingly. Using a 140 square meter apartment as collateral for such a high-interest loan. How stupid. To him, it was like a sheep willingly walking into a wolf's den. Leaning back again, Xing Yang said with a sarcastic smile, "Just this house isn't enough for a 5 million loan. This deal won't work." Panicking, the young man clasped his hands together and begged, "Brother Xing, please don't refuse. Even 4 million would be fine." Trying to sound reliable, he added, "I consulted a master who said my luck has been great lately. I'll make big money soon." Xing Yang relaxed completely, placing his hands behind his head. "The most I can give you is 3.5 million. Any more and I'd be losing money." Inside, he sneered. Despite his age, this kid was nothing but a gambler, and now completely in his grasp. The young man's face lit up instantly. He thanked Xing Yang repeatedly, promising to repay the money quickly. "Oh," Xing Yang leaned forward again, his smile cold. "Since you accepted my terms, you'll return 4.9 million within 3 months. Fail to do that, and the house becomes mine." Then he added calmly, "If there's no problem, just sign the IOU. The money will be released within 3 days." The young man nodded nervously. "No problem." After a brief pause, he added, "But I have one condition." Xing Yang raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh, what condition?" 10 minutes later, the deal was finalized. Outside the building, the young man walked out with a smile, clutching his documents tightly. One of Xing Yang's men stood at the door and politely said, "Thank you for your cooperation, Brother Chen. Take care." The young man checked his phone. 3.5 million yuan had already been transferred into his account. Relief and excitement shone in his eyes. But then, a cold smile spread across his face. In his heart, he mocked Xing Yang as a fool, because in 1 month, the apocalypse would arrive. And when that happened, who would still be alive to collect this worthless loan? Now that the money was in his hands, he would prepare properly this time. He would never live the miserable life of his previous existence again. In his past life, a terrifying natural disaster had struck. An event that reshaped the planet's entire ecosystem. Deadly solar radiation erupted from the sun, drowning Earth in scorching light. Global temperatures soared to nearly 50 degrees Celsius, turning the world into a blazing inferno. A 30-day high-temperature apocalypse began. Cities melted. The ground cracked. The living world became a burning desert. Animals went feral. In the ruins, a black wolf with glowing red eyes stared greedily at the charred remains of a human arm. Back in the present, Xing Yang sat in his office, laughing loudly while holding the signed contract. He couldn't believe how easily that kid had agreed to such brutal interest rates just to get money fast. Laughing, he mocked, "Gambling dogs like him don't deserve to own houses anyway." One of his men approached hesitantly. "Boss, that kid's house was worth more than $4 million, yet he accepted only $3.5 million. Doesn't that seem suspicious?" Xing Yang leaned back lazily. "Don't worry, I've seen countless gamblers like him. People desperate enough to sell even their families for money. Compared to that, a house is nothing." Then, in a cold, calculating tone, he ordered, "Contact the casino, fix the gambling results. When the time comes, not only will we take the house, we won't even let him run. Sell off everything valuable he owns." His subordinate nodded eagerly. "Understood." As the sun set, the city skyline glowed. The young man walked alone down the street, bathed in orange light. He glanced at his phone and smiled softly. There are still plenty of good people in this world. He chuckled inwardly. Just raise the interest a little, and that idiot hands over the money immediately. His smile deepened. Did he really think he could outplay me? That loan shark thought I was just an old fool. In a single day, he had taken high-interest loans from every loan shark in Luocheng. Such interest rates meant nothing to him. Once the money was in his hands, no one would ever get it back. "Once the money is in my hands," he declared silently, "no one should even dream of getting it back." His thoughts sank further, slipping into darker depths as memories from a previous life resurfaced. Parched earth, dying vegetation, creatures forced to change or perish. Civilization had collapsed, humanity had fallen into chaos. As resources dwindled, survival demanded sacrifice. Morality was the first to be abandoned. In that shattered world, true supremacy did not belong to kings or armies. It belonged to those who controlled resources. Resources had become so scarce that people were willing to descend into betrayal and violence for the smallest chance at survival. Those who had once lived in luxury, wealthy elites, and even famous stars of a bygone era had been reduced to beggars. For a single sausage or even just a cup of water, they were forced to kneel and plead. Those who failed to secure resources wandered the streets aimlessly until they eventually met painful deaths on the barren, desolate land of a ruined world. But now, everything was different. The young man had returned from the war once more. Before the disaster arrived, he still had time, plenty of it, enough time to seize everything essential before the world burned again. He lowered his hand and touched his face. A cold smile slowly formed on his lips. Icy determination flickered in his eyes, and faint red sparks shimmered around him, almost imperceptible. A moment later, as he walked through the city, laughter drifted toward him from a nearby cafe. "Ross." He turned his head slightly, his sharp gaze locking onto the source. Inside a brightly lit dessert shop, two women were chatting excitedly near the counter. Chen? He recognized it instantly. A luxury ice cream brand, considered even more expensive than Haagen-Dazs, often called the Nobel Prize of the ice cream world. The moment he saw it, his gaze sharpened. His expression grew serious, and a faint glimmer of recognition appeared in his eyes. Memories from his previous life surfaced. He remembered how he had never wanted to buy that expensive ice cream for himself, yet for Liu Chen, he had bought it countless times. He clenched his teeth, bitterness flooding his thoughts. Giving her such an expensive dessert had been an even greater waste than feeding it to a dog. The more he thought about it, the more frustration boiled inside him. Regret tightened around his heart, and suddenly he spoke aloud. "This time, I'll enjoy it myself." With firm resolve, he strode toward the counter. He slammed his hand down loudly and spoke to the staff in a clear, confident voice. "I want 10 of every flavor in the shop." The surrounding customers were stunned. One woman said in disbelief, "Can he really afford that?" Another whispered with widened eyes, "The way he ordered, he looks kind of cool." The young man stood calmly, one hand resting on his chin, thinking quietly to himself. This time he would indulge in everything he had once denied himself. Behind the counter, the shop attendant panicked. She stared at him in disbelief. He's handsome, she thought, but he doesn't look rich at all. Her voice trembled slightly as she asked if he was serious. To be sure, she explained that their shop only sold high-end ice cream and that ordering 10 of every flavor would cost more than 20,000 yuan. She asked again, "Are you certain you want to place this order?" Nearby, a tall woman with long red hair let out a mocking laugh. Tilting her head, she sneered, "How can a man dressed so plainly afford such an expensive taste?" She laughed arrogantly. The young man's eyes narrowed. He looked at her. His voice was calm, yet sharp as a blade. "Is what you just said really what you believe?" The woman's smile faltered. Her expression turned defensive. Annoyance flashed across her face as she snapped back, asking if he really thought she would bow before him. Her voice rose as she shouted, demanding to know who he thought he was, to act with such arrogance. The young man, however, merely smiled faintly. His face was calm, cold, and brimming with confidence. He said quietly that he had already given her a chance to step back, but since she had insisted on provoking him, she would now kneel right in front of everyone. His voice dropped even lower, almost a whisper, yet the certainty within it was so icy and absolute that it sent a shiver through the air. "Now," he said softly, "not even God can stop this." The woman's face twisted with rage and she began screaming at him, but the young man stood there with an effortless smile, completely indifferent to her shrill cries. Turning toward the counter, he spoke calmly to the shop attendant. "Pack all the ice cream in the store. I want everything." The staff hesitated. At that moment, he took out his phone and displayed his account balance. He wanted everything. The staff hesitated. At that moment, he took out his phone and displayed his account balance. 20 million yuan. The attendant's eyes widened in shock. Her hands trembled as she spoke, saying she needed to confirm with the manager before quickly rushing inside. Moments later, the store manager appeared. He bowed respectfully, introduced himself as FCHY, and politely asked what Mr. Chen required. The young man looked completely relaxed. In a calm, even tone, he said, "Calculate the total price of all the ice cream in the store. There's no need to keep the shop open today anyway." The manager froze for a split second, then, forcing a courteous smile, he nodded and said he would check the stock. Inside, he was stunned. What kind of big shot buys an entire month's sales in one go? He knew well that ice cream this expensive rarely sold. Most people only came to look. A short while later, he returned and reported, "The ice cream currently on display is worth around 70,000 yuan, including the full inventory. The total comes to roughly 1 million yuan." A faint smile appeared on the young man's lips. Not that expensive, he thought. Besides, the apocalypse was coming anyway. Clearing out the entire stock made sense. If the world ended, he could sit at home and enjoy ice cream in peace. Chen Xiao spoke calmly. "I'll transfer 300,000 yuan as an advance. Deliver all the stock to my address as soon as possible." The manager's eyes widened again, then instantly lit up with excitement. He nodded enthusiastically and assured him everything would be handled immediately. His attitude shifted completely as he addressed him with newfound respect. "Brother Chen." Chen Xiao turned toward the women standing nearby, a faint smile on his face. His voice was calm, steady, and full of assurance. "Feel free to choose any ice cream you like," he said. "It's all on me." The women gasped in disbelief. One squealed in delight. "Chen Xiao is paying for everyone." Another could hardly believe it. "He's actually this rich." Their faces lit up as they showered him with praise, whispering among themselves that he looked even more handsome now. Chen Xiao stood there effortlessly, confidence radiating from him, a faint smile resting on his lips. Then his expression shifted. Slowly, he turned his gaze toward the red-haired woman who had mocked him earlier. His tone hardened. He stated clearly that his offer was not meant for her. He was still waiting for her to fulfill her promise, to kneel before everyone. The woman froze. All her arrogance vanished in an instant. Her lips began to tremble. She wanted to speak, but no sound came out. Moments later, unable to withstand the humiliation and crushing pressure, she collapsed to her knees before him and pressed her forehead to the ground. Chen Xiao watched her quietly. He stood straight, a faint smile on his lips. The surrounding crowd fell into stunned silence, watching the scene unfold. Then he calmly looked ahead. His eyes were half lowered, his voice perfectly steady as he spoke. She should have understood her place before putting on such a show. The scene shifted. By the riverside, a peaceful view unfolded, rows of cherry blossom trees lining the bank. Beneath the warm glow of the setting sun, petals drifted slowly through the air. Chen Xiao sat on a wooden bench, a popsicle in one hand. He took a relaxed bite, then nodded with a satisfied smile. "This ice cream assassin," he said, "really lives up to its name. Both the flavor and the texture are exceptional." Leaning back as he ate, he muttered lightly to himself, But mid-sentence, he suddenly raised his hand. A sharp surge of blue light erupted in the air before him as if space itself were twisting. A deep, square-shaped portal formed, surrounded by glowing lines of energy. Chen Xiao calmly reminded himself that this ability of his could store anything inside in perfect condition, which meant he could enjoy fresh ice cream whenever he wanted. The thought made him smile. With a playful motion, he tossed a small blue bag into the glowing portal. In a confident tone, he remarked that with this power, summoning any star or young model would hardly be a challenge. Just imagining it amused him. Chen Xiao raised his hand once more. A black, gleaming square shape materialized before him. He stared at it carefully, then spoke in a quiet voice. "I didn't expect my power to be reborn along with me." He remembered clearly, in his previous life, abilities had only begun awakening gradually after the apocalypse began. As he gazed at the mysterious power floating above his palm, a faint smile curved his lips. He admitted to himself that he did not yet fully understand how it worked. But one thing was certain. In the days to come, this would become his greatest trump card. He returned to the bench beneath the cherry blossoms, petals drifted down all around him, and the evening light had softened into a gentle glow. In a low voice, he murmured, "It's time to begin preparing." Safe houses, cold storage facilities, weapons, energy reserves. Letting out a quiet breath, he muttered to himself, "There's still so much to do." Just then, his phone suddenly buzzed. The ringtone announced, "Little Fairy is calling." Chen Xiao froze and turned his head slightly. Taking out his phone, he saw the name glowing on the screen. Lu Wancheng. His expression hardened. "Her again?" he muttered. "What rotten luck." In the darkness, the name shimmered faintly on the screen. Chen Xiao paused for a moment. After his parents had passed away, Lu Wancheng had entered his life like a savior. In his grief and loneliness, she had felt like warmth and light, like a hand reaching out in a pitch-black world. Back then, he had been naive. He had never seen her true intentions. To him, she was the light that had entered his life. But the truth was, she had never cared about Chen Xiao himself, only about the inheritance his parents had left behind. Before long, their relationship became built on lies and manipulation. Chen Xiao remembered how she used to sit beside him, speaking softly, telling him that if he truly wanted to marry her, her mother had certain conditions. A fully paid luxury apartment in the city center had to be transferred into her name, and on top of that, an additional dowry of 880,000 yuan. Blindly in love, Chen Xiao agreed to everything. Yet it felt like he was falling into a bottomless pit. Her demands kept growing again and again until every bit of his savings was drained, and even that wasn't enough. Then she began pressuring him to sell his ancestral home, all so she could buy yet another luxury apartment in the city. When Chen Xiao hesitated, her tone instantly shifted. Cunning, emotional, persuasive. She told him it was all for their future, that his old family home wasn't worth keeping anyway.